Okay, so I've got an element of deja vu sitting here because I gave evidence to the Times Education Commission during the pandemic, and I was rather seduced by the fact that Michael Mapurgo, amongst others, was on the panel that I was giving evidence to, and they said, "What do you think of Ofsted?" And I said, "Well, Ofsted is a reign of terror." And then went on to explain why I thought Ofsted was a reign of terror, because it was incredibly punitive, still is, but it was incredibly punitive under the previous Chief Inspector of Schools. Then I came off the interview, shut my laptop down, and just went and checked on my phone. And this was back in the days of Twitter. And straight away on Twitter, there was Alison Peacock says Ofsted is a reign of terror. And there was quite a furore. I mean, I'm not ashamed of anything I said. I completely stand by what I said. But Amanda Spielman wasn't very happy with me. Let's say that. So this is a little bit of a deja vu now. I'm online. I'm talking to a group of people. What do I think about Ofsted? Um, Leading the Chartered College, we decided we wanted to consult our members to think about alternatives to Ofsted. We asked them to fill in the consultation around Ofsted. I've been involved with the NEHT several times doing studies about Ofsted. I was part of the NEU Beyond Ofsted Commission, part of the review of teaching with Mary Bousted now. The reality is, until we reduce the hard accountability measures, whatever system we come up with, we keep going round in a loop. We've looked at peer review. We haven't yet looked at something which I'm really quite excited about, Peter, which is the idea of a sort of anonymous report on the Ofsted inspection from the head teacher's point of view. I think that's really quite exciting because having been a head myself, the last 9 Ofsted inspections that I had, quite frankly, if they left the school and they were happy, I was very happy to say it was a great inspection because I'd got them off my back. But if there was a way of doing something anonymous, that could be really useful actually. So we've asked our members to look at the current proposed framework and for all its faults and flaws, to try and work with Ofsted to see what we might do to improve it. So I just want to tell you what the areas are that we've been looking at. So on consultations, focus groups, interviews with the Chief Inspector himself, wider paper-based consultations with 45,000 members of the Chartered College. The areas that we asked them to look at were improved clarity and focus, to address bias, to focus on the individual context of each school, to expect to find an evidence-informed culture, and to recognise the high pressure that's caused by inspection. Those were the areas that we specifically asked them to look at in relation to their latest framework. So in terms of clarity and focus, they've not changed the 5-point scale. They explicitly rejected a met, not met scale, except for safeguarding, as giving too little information and nuance. They said a 3-point scale would put most schools on the middle grade, and a 4-point scale would be too similar to the current system, and that parents appreciated a 5-point scale. They have not considered moving the inspection of safeguarding out of Ofsted's remit, which our members suggested might be good to have a separate system to look at safeguarding. They didn't even want to consider that. They've not considered providing a shorter parent-facing report card alongside a more comprehensive school-facing report. Instead, a colour-coded report card will be available to everybody with grading to help parents and a nuanced report explaining strengths and areas for development in each area. And you will know that the areas that are proposed are exceptional, a strong standard, an expected standard, needs attention, and urgent improvement. So one has to say, really and truly, where it's up to. What's the difference?
Yes.
There we are. They have reduced the number of evaluation areas from 8 to 6 by combining areas. So they now have curriculum and teaching with attendance and behaviour rather than separate areas for each. I think that was probably because the logistics of grading so many different areas in each of the categories was becoming potentially, a nightmare. They have reduced the number of standards within each grade, and they've tightened the definition of the expected standard and strong standard grades. They're going to use a secure fit instead of a best fit. Now, this means that if you've got to meet the standard in every grade. So if you've got one particular area that goes into the red, that means everything is subject to being looked at again, whether that's equivalent to a requires improvement or a special measures. So how's that reduced stress? They have acknowledged that it's not their role. I mean, listen to this, that it's not their role to define inclusion, and instead have offered their approach to inclusion. And this approach mentions children and learners who are disadvantaged, those with SEND, those known to social care, and those who may face other barriers to learning. But there's nothing mentioned about those with protected characteristics, which effectively renders those children invisible.
Yes.
Second point, we recommended that they should specifically address bias. So we know from the last 33 years of inspection that bias is absolutely, a huge problem within the accountability system, whether that's bias related to the area, the background of the school, the situation of the school, whether it's related to the characteristics of the young people who attend that school, parents, all sorts of things. They've said in response to this that they will carry out an immediate evaluation post and survey post inspection. So they're going to inspect themselves. That they will measure consistency through HMI shadow inspections, a desk-based study, but they don't specifically mention addressing bias. So essentially, that stays the same. They've set out in their approach to training into quality assurance, including pilot inspections, shadowing learning, hoping that this will improve consistency. They've said, we hope this will ensure consistency in the inspection approach. But it's not clear whether the quality assurance will consider issues of bias and fairness. They aim to match the expertise of Ofsted inspectors with specific types of provision. So this is particularly in relation to primary schools, particularly small primary schools, which may only have 2 classes. And there are many primary schools. There are 4,000 small primary schools, are Church of England schools. They can't be guaranteed, but they're going to try. They're going to aim to provide Ofsted inspectors who have experience of teaching in a primary setting.
Oh, God.
Fundamental.
Right.
Thirdly, we asked them to focus on the specific context of the school. I mean, this is, for me, all of these they could all be number one priorities, but if you don't understand the context of where you're inspecting, and we know from work that's been carried out over the last number of years that you're far less likely to achieve the top grades if you are in a school that is serving, a marginalised community.
Yeah.
So they've explained how they're going to take context into account, starting an inspection with conversations about context with school leaders. And they're going to use effectively a kind of family of schools database to try and align school performance with similar schools. But that system is flawed. It's flawed in its current form, and it will continue to be flawed, we believe. They've set out inspection toolkits that say that they want the inspectors to look at the systems and processes within each school. And they're proposing plans for training to support inspectors to understand how to interpret contextual factors. Now, Sir Martin Oliver himself, in one of our round tables with him, said that he would encourage inspectors to engage in professional discourse. Now, what he said in a small round table with some of our fellows felt very encouraging, very reassuring. But you scale that up to the numbers of inspectors that will be carrying out those inspections, and we start to worry about how that might actually happen. And also the timescale that these inspectors have got to do, and actually a more complex job than they've had before in the space of 2 days in a school. The level of conversation that you can have that genuinely might change the direction. Well, let's see. We said that there should be an expectation for evidence-informed school cultures. And this is an area where they are saying that they will look at professional learning opportunities. Sir Martin Oliver has brought in professional learning for inspectors. They are expected, they've got an Ofsted Academy that's been established. We've tried to infiltrate that Ofsted Academy. We've been allowed one training session so far that Catscut led. Um, so and the slides for that training will eventually be available for everybody to see, but they're not releasing them yet. So in terms of the transparency that we were hearing about at Estin, how oh happy day, wouldn't that be lovely? Um, and the fifth area is this area of high pressure. So Ofsted themselves commissioned Sinead McBrearty from the Education Support Foundation to produce a report about well-being of teachers, head teachers, and inspectors through the inspection process. Now she's produced a brilliant report, which, and I'm on the well-being reference group for Ofsted, which is it's like a gag. So I go on that wellbeing reference group and they say, of course, you can't say anything that we've talked about. Not that we talk about anything of any substance, so you're not missing out. But the reality is that that report that Sinead produced, which is very detailed and very informative, you wouldn't know that anything had been done, to be honest. Um, so they've said Ofsted does not expect any provider to be doing any more than it needs to just for Ofsted.
Yeah, I
Now,
know that.
when Sir Martin said this at the ASCL conference earlier in the year, there was uproar. The audience just burst out laughing because, of course, if you know that you're going to have an Ofsted inspection, you're not going to sit back and go, oh, well, let them come in, they'll find what they find. You're going to work like Billio to try and produce. It's like your mother-in-law coming around. You're going to do whatever you can to make everything look great. And everybody just laughed. And he was standing on that stage, um, looking out into darkness, because when you're on that stage, you can't see any of the audience, of course. And his knee-jerk reaction to the audience laughing when he said, "We don't expect you to do any extra work for us," was to tell us off.
Oh, yeah.
He stood there in
Yeah.
silence, sort of hands on hips, and it was very much like, until you're going to be quiet, And we all were saying, it's like a head teacher. It's like a head teacher. We're going to have to go and stand outside his office in a minute. It went down very, very badly because essentially the response what he could have done was laugh with us. He could have said, "Well, okay, perhaps it is a bit unrealistic, ha ha ha," but he didn't. He stood there in silence, glaring at everybody until they were quiet. So I don't actually think too much is going to change in that respect. I mean, they have removed deep dives, so that's a blessing. But the reality is, Teacher Tap have done a survey of teacher opinion about the new Ofsted framework, and teachers are decidedly underwhelmed. We've heard that the NEHT are going to suggest that each school does a risk assessment to their governing body around the impact on head teachers. Truly, it feels as if nothing's changed. It feels as if the goalposts have been shifted, but nothing has changed really. The only thing that I would say that potentially could be helpful is that because there is such a confusing plethora of measures and scores and grades that are going to be given to every school every time there's an inspection, and because there is not going to be a single heading, a single banner, that hopefully removes the sort of cliff edge grading, which means that we perhaps don't have those banners anymore outside schools saying this is a super duper 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 school, that it's not easy to just trip off the tongue that you're outstanding and brag about it. Maybe, just maybe, it becomes less interesting and more of a boring routine, and maybe that puts Ofsted back in their box a little bit. But the reality is, I think, it's very hard for teachers to comment. So we've asked them and we've asked them, but they're suffering Stockholm syndrome because inspection has been going on in many cases for teachers ever since they've experienced school. There's been Ofsted inspections. So to ask teachers to imagine, you've got to be an old crone like me to imagine a system where you don't have Ofsted or you had a different form of Ofsted is something that is quite beyond people's ken. So I don't express a great deal of hope, but those were the areas that our members sought to try and make a difference marginally. Maybe they have done. Thank you very much.